This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
And welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me today. On your left is Richard Field. On your right is John Cameron. I am James Just, your host with the most hair at the moment. And
no, I think we're the most hair all the time.
Well, I don't know, John. Give me a couple years. You never know. It may all fall out. We don't know.
I got to send you that picture of me with long hair and the straggly beard and the wild look in my eye. I'll have to say.
I think you
the
said
wild look's still there, but the hair and the beard's gone.
I think you said it to me once, but we'll do that again. Biden's speech the other day. He had a speech that has created a firestorm of memes, shall we say? Here, let's show you this one. There you go. Biden is reminiscent of the V for Vendetta people. It's the imagery is actually quite stark. Because I don't think they've actually thought this thing that far through. I don't actually think
like they ever think anything through. I mean,
well, I wouldn't be so sure. I would not be so sure. There's a political scientist, or I guess you call him that worked for Hitler for most of his career, who essentially is embroidered upon or improved upon, if you want to use that word, Machiavelli, and said that in order for a government, for the state to stay in power, you have to have an enemy. And Biden's speech was 100% about creating an enemy, the MAGA Republicans, making them the enemy, and saying that if you're not against the MAGA Republicans, if you're not with us, you're out to lunch. And coming just a couple of months before the midterms, this is his administration's, I think, last gasp to save Congress for the Democrats. And it's pretty scary how they're using imagery to shape public opinion. And I think it's entirely on purpose what they're doing. They're demonizing Republicans who deserve to be demonized. I won't argue about that. But they're doing it for political purposes. The political purposes to keep the equally evil Democrats in power for as long as time goes on, or at least the Biden administration.
Richard, you misunderstood me when I said that I'm not saying that they don't have good intent, or they don't have their intent is bad. But I'm not saying they don't have a plan. I'm not saying that what they're doing is not planful and effective. But there are intended consequences and unintended consequences. And when you do something like this, and even your own party mouthpieces, like the New York Times and all the major news media and lots of their online propaganda, like Facebook and Twitter and all the rest of them, question it, and in news articles by those people bring up the inconsistencies in the messaging. Well, they've been doing this, and the they is anybody in power for years, and where it's really obvious if you're outside of the groupthink is in the environmental movement. If you don't agree with exactly their prescription for saving the planet, which is going to, I guess, explode if temperature goes up by 1 degree, which isn't the case, then you're the enemy, and nothing that you say can be, if you don't hate nuclear power, if you don't hate fossil fuels, if you don't hate anybody that doesn't hate those things and love wind and batteries and electric cars and sacrifice in your ability to maneuver, that Americans have gotten used to for since 50 years since they've had automobiles, then you're the enemy. And so whatever, and the at least with the environmental movement, and I'm getting off track a little bit, and I apologize, it was the God of the environment. They couldn't say believe in our God, because that's the antithesis of their platform. But so they've been doing this kind of thing forever. If you don't believe what we believe, you're the enemy and you hate the world, you hate Mother Nature, you hate the U.S. And Trump was doing it with if we don't keep those evil Mexicans out, the world's going to end. So they've all been doing this stuff. But when Biden did this and had raised the kind of furor, I think he used that word, wasn't it? Or did you say uproar or whatever, James? Then I think they've done something which I feel is a wonderful thing. They've made even more people distrustful of anything that comes out of their mouth, and that's good.
I think there's another interesting aspect to this whole thing, which is that I think major media realized that with the red background and the Marines standing in the background and so forth, that the Biden team had taken it a bit too far. So the major networks refused to carry the speech. And I saw at least one rendering of the speech. I forget whether it was on YouTube or CNN or where they had replaced the red background with American flags. They had actually replaced the background. Talk about modifying the message or massaging the message. It's pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah, and well, what disturbs me is we are now okay with demonizing 20% of the population. Whichever side you are on, the Republicans are perfectly happy demonizing 20% of the population. The Democrats are perfectly happy demonizing 20% of the population. But is it just 20%? Or is it anybody who doesn't agree with me? I'm just going to use that 20% as an example. There's no good end. There's no good end to that mindset. There's just not.
And that's the kind of thinking that leads to, Jews, for example, being in camps because they were established as the enemy and they were responsible for everybody being poor and nobody having any money because they had the money, and the inflation because they got rich, and so when the Jews were carted off to concentration camps, then it was okay. Or at least,
the enemy is unimportant, and I mean Hitler used Jews, the Russians used the terrorists in places like Chechnya, the Muslims. George W. Bush used the Muslims in Iraq. Trump used the Mexicans. It doesn't make any difference. There has to be an enemy. Who the enemy is immaterial. As long as we have an enemy, we can divide the country, us against them. And if you're not with us, you're them, therefore you're the enemy. And we can justify putting people into the army to kill and be killed in favor of supporting the so-called group or the power, the group that is in power, as opposed to the group
fatherland, motherland, state.
Yeah.
No, it's no coincidence that both Hitler and Trump used motherland as a trope.
And how many people are willing to violate their own personal ethics as long as it's against those other guys? It's fine. No, it's fine. It's them. It's them. It's them. It's okay because it's them. It's a sad thing.
First, you have to dehumanize, and that's that's been the attempt all along to dehumanize the. Nobody ever says the people that vote Republicans, the mothers who are against abortion, the whatever, it's the abortionists, it's the Republicans or whatever. You dehumanize them, and then the bad things you do to them aren't being done to people; they're being done to an unnamed label. So I agree with you. It's a horrible thing. It's a bad road to go further down. We've been down it before, and I hate to see us going down it again.
Let's talk about another bad road. America's, we call it secret government by proxy, which is, it actually has many ways it manifests itself, from universities giving kind of bogus studies to censorship from Google and Facebook, which we now know is done under the guise of FBI. Hey, beware of this. And well, if you've got FBI saying beware of this, at the same time you have politicians dragging you in front of a hearing, a meeting hearing, and wagging their finger telling you do something or I'm going to do something. Well, is that really free speech? Is that really making decisions of their own free will, or have they been pressured by politicians, government agencies, the law, to behave in a way that certain politicians want and will benefit that certain group of politicians? And how deep this is and how much it plays out is it's a very dangerous thing, John. Where we have Richard.
Yeah, well, with the regulatory state, there is no length to which the government can't and won't go to control speech by the various speech platforms, whether it's social media, the networks, the print media, whatever. There was a guest, it was Zuckerberg was on Joe, whatever,
Rogan.
yeah, Joe Rogan the other day, and he essentially said that somebody from the FBI, I think it was, came to him and said, "Hey, there's something coming out. We think it's from Russia about the Joe Rogan or the Hunter Biden laptop. You might want to watch out for it." And they said, "Okay," and it got suppressed. That is just very obvious election interference by the FBI of all people to promote the party that they favor as opposed to the party that they disfavor. And that's just one example. And the reason that Facebook was so willing to kowtow is because the unstated threat is that if you don't, we will have hearings about antitrust, about monopoly, about whatever, and we'll drive you out of business. We'll make it impossible for you to do business. We will destroy your wealth. That's the threat, and it's implicit, but it's real, and it's ongoing.
Well, they don't have to totally destroy you. They just have to make your life a royal pain in the butt, right? They don't even have to completely destroy you. They just have to continually drag you through the regulatory mission. They don't even.
Yeah, I mean, it's very instructive now that the space program is failing to launch the latest NASA spaceship to the moon. They keep having problems, and they're spending billions of dollars, wasting billions of dollars trying to do it. Meanwhile, Elon Musk has, with his space company, he has the ability fairly quickly to put a man on the moon again. And he also has a proven system for providing satellite communications for cell phones in areas that are now essentially not within range of a cell phone signal. And guess what? The federal government is saying, no, we're not going to approve that. Why? Because he opened his big yap talking about how Yahoo was an enemy of not Yahoo. Twitter is an enemy of free speech. That's the stick that they're using to go after anybody that doesn't agree with them. It's a big stick, and it's you have to kind of look for it, but it's there.
Well, we do some research, believe it or not, for tens of thousands of viewers out there before we get on the show, and we looked at one article. I'm not going to really. I'm a little kind of iffy about the direction the organization's going in, so I don't really want to promote it. But they were talking about how little money it really took as long as people were willing to do the bidding. There's some universities and some NGOs out there that basically make stuff up, and it becomes the truth. And then these electronic media organizations push their groupthink to the top of search results and present it as news and fact. And the money that changed hands for it was infinitesimally small in the big scheme of things, like, I don't know, less than $1 billion, a few $100 million, and in a couple of instances, just less than $1 million. But, if your quote unquote research is assumed to be fact by the lamestream media and the electronic media, and anytime anybody searches for information about it, this little puny organization with made up stuff is at the top of the search results, people start taking it as the truth. So, that's one of the reasons why I'm using DuckDuckGo instead of Google, because I've run experiments and Google many times will not let me get to where I want to go. It will make me go where it wants me to go. And we've done experiments over and over. I mean, if you were to search for, Joe Biden laptop, Biden corruption at right before the election versus FBI case Trump Russia, you would find no way to get to the Biden information, or it'd be very, very, very hard to get to it without putting in very particular search terms or going to a source that had it. But you could get to the stuff on Trump, whether you wanted to or not, very easily. So simply by changing the algorithms and search terms, they've changed the reality, and it's frightening. Frightening.
Yeah, this show, Libertarian Counterpoint, used to have a place on YouTube, a dedicated channel where you could look at the archives and so forth. Now, if you enter Libertarian Counterpoint into the search function in YouTube, last time I checked, you have to put it in quotes in order to come up with the program. Otherwise, you come up with a bunch of garbage.
Yeah, the algorithms are not friendly to those who speak their mind freely. They're just not. But there's other dangers in the world. Food prices in Africa are soaring, and energy prices in Europe are also soaring. Now, they blame the war, and you can actually kind of make the sense that they're blaming the war for the energy prices in Europe skyrocketing, but the food prices in Africa are something we predicted a couple years ago. This is not war related. This was something that we knew was coming down the pike. When you have supply chain disruptions, it's not the rich countries that suffer food shortages; it's the poor countries.
Well, it's all
have no food.
It's
Right?
also related to the war. I mean, Ukraine and Russia supply something like a quarter of all of the food that is eaten in Africa, wheat and corn and so forth. And as a reliable source of grains, they're out of the picture. If they're even able to plant the crops, they can't get them out through Odessa because the port is a war zone. And we're talking about starvation in northern Africa in this winter,
and sub-Saharan Africa as well. And all of it.
We're also talking about people freezing in the dark, literally, in Germany and other places in Europe, because predictably Russia is saying, "You going to continue to arm Ukraine? We're going to cut off the gas pipeline that supplies Germany, and that gas pipeline supplies 80, I don't know what the exact figure is, but it's well over a majority, 80-90% of the gas used pre-war in Germany came from Russia, not there anymore. And the LNG carriers to bring gas from the United States to Europe, I think there's maybe one available right now. They're all booked from now until Kingdom Come. And if you think a supply chain issue is a problem, consider how long it takes to build an LNG tanker. That's a long lead time in the supply chain. So we are Biden, and the Biden administration is essentially condemning the world to starvation and freezing in the cold until the last Ukrainian fighter dies.
Well, and nothing that's come up in. Richard, you are a farmer still. You were a farmer before, and petroleum products end up in fertilizer.
Nitrogen.
And
from natural gas.
Fertilizer from natural gas. And natural gas supplies in the world are, in essence, they're not unlimited, but they're pretty darn near unlimited. And these governments have decided that natural gas is bad, even though it's way cleaner than burning diesel or gasoline or anything else, and 10 times cleaner if you're really concerned about carbon dioxide than coal. And they've pushed people away from going to natural gas. I remember when I lived in Europe, people were using natural gas in cars, and the local transport company here, or transport monopoly here, proudly says on its buses, run on clean natural gas. But somehow they've flipped that, and natural gas is bad, and fertilizer is bad, and people
Yeah, we're talking
eating.
about fertilizer. I'm not sure exactly what it is that's environmentally bad about nitrogen, but the government of Sri Lanka fell because they were following the eco religion that you can't use nitrogen fertilizer. I'm not sure what the reasoning for it is, but
Well,
they cut
European
off
gasoline.
nitrogen fertilizer, and their government fell. There are protests in the Netherlands, in Germany, elsewhere across Europe because they can't get enough fertilizer. And guess what? A lot of that fertilizer also comes from either Ukraine or Russia.
Here's the thing with the supply chain. There's actually enough gas in the European Union to supply their needs. They just don't access it. They refuse to access it.
You're
Right? We
talking
know
about
that.
natural gas?
Yeah.
Natural gas, and there's huge natural gas.
Without the two pipelines operating, importing from Russia, I'm not sure there is. There might be.
Well, no, not now because they don't access it.
Yeah.
They refuse to access it.
Well, no, they don't. They don't refuse. Russia has said, "Go pound sand." We'll settle.
No, it's not the Russian gas, their own gas. They refuse to access their own gas. The European Union refuses to access
I'm
their
not
own
sure
gas.
about that.
The UK and the North Sea gas, not just North Sea oil. The gas, oil's famous, but there's lots of gas. If they turn the pumps on, could supply every bit of the missing, just the UK, every bit of the missing oil and gas within a few years. But if you think ecologists are bad, here are the eco-terrorists here. They chain themselves to fences there, throw themselves under trucks, and all that stuff's evil. But now, I think the worm is turning. If in well, I don't know. I hate to bring it up, but even Newsome is coming around to nuclear power. So maybe there is some hope. I don't know.
Interesting you bring up Newsom. We've got Newsom's environmental agenda was shoved through the State House this last week.
Flushed through.
And and the question is, what is his real agenda, right? Because their stated agenda is never what the actual agenda is. So you kind of have to try to decipher it from a reverse engineering standpoint.
He's running for president.
What is his actual agenda?
Well, no, I agree with Richard. His agenda is running for president. He's running and saying he's not going to run, and then when it gets closer and his poll numbers look good, and he spends some more money on political ads and all the rest of that, he can completely ignore the outcomes of the programs that he and his fellow blue. Is it blue? Is this a blue state or a red state? I get so confused. Yeah, because red should be commie, and blue should be, I don't know, libertarian.
They switched after Reagan. I don't know.
The simple fact is that yes, California's air is much cleaner than it used to be, and probably the State Air Resources Board had their fingers in that and can take some responsibility for it. But once you get to a certain level of cleanliness, getting any cleaner, depending on how you define it, is a zero-sum game. You can't. They're now talking about going backwards to have the air quality or the carbon dioxide footprint of California the same it was in 1990 or something, with more than double the population and about 50% more cars. And they're going to forget, of course, about the forest fires that they caused with bad forestry, that was the equivalent of running 22 million additional cars for a year or something. But that's what he's doing. He's running on a green agenda.
Yeah. And of course the irony is that no gas powered cars, all electric by 2035. Oh, and by the way, we're shutting down. You have to ration your power use this fall because of the heat wave. At least here in Southern California, we don't have enough electric power to power the grid without all of those additional electric cars. It's silly on the face of it.
Oh, it's silly on the face of it. It's silly
and dangerous.
Oh yeah. And people will
nod their head until they freeze in the cold or swelter in the heat.
And until we decentralize the grid, which is actually very easy to do. I mean, you need some crossover on the grid for emergencies, but there's no reason with the technology that's out there now with clean nuclear power and it's all contained anyway. It's the only form of power that actually contains its waste products, and they can recycle like they did in France. These little nukes that they have now, little nuclear power plants, you could drop one every, I don't know, 3 or 4 square miles and power local neighborhoods basically for free. In the big scheme of things, with no 1,000 golden eagles being killed at just one bird chopper farm, without the heat sink of all of those black mirrors on people's roofs, without the uncertainty of electric cars, where you can only drive them 300 miles before you got to find a place that can charge them, and on and on and on and on. It's insanity, but he's running for president. It's that simple.
Well, what I find insane is that this electric car thing was not based upon passing laws. It wasn't part of this environmental agenda he passed. It was quite literally done with an executive order and a regulatory agency. There was no law actually passed.
Welcome to
An
America.
executive order and a regulatory agency made up rules, and now we can't have cars after 20. Now we can't have gas-powered cars after.
You can't make them. You can keep them.
And we are ridiculed
For now, John, for now.
and we are ridiculed for saying there is such a thing as the deep state. All we're talking about is unlimited power for the administrative state. That's what the deep state is, and it's getting worse and worse and worse as we progress into the 21st century.
Yeah, we'll talk about getting worse and worse. Fire prevention in Yosemite. We got a couple minutes, so let's cover this real quick. Fire prevention in Yosemite. Do you do some cutting and burning, or do you just let it burn when it eventually catches fire? How do you actually manage? What's the proper way to manage something like Yosemite?
Well, Yosemite was managed very well by the Native Americans, which was why it was so pretty and so likable. But then we came in, and by collective we, I mean everybody but me, came in and suppressed fires. So where now it's very, very hard to do selective burning because you end up with a firestorm. So the only alternative is to go in with the chainsaw and cut some of that stuff and carry it out of there. And there's one lunatic ecomaniac guy who has a little NGO who is constantly bringing lawsuits that the green terrorists back to stop all of it. Because apparently they want Yosemite to burn to a tinder, to a crisp. But I think what they really want is to put a fence up around it and say, oh, there's too much fire danger here. We can't let people in. I think that's their true goal, right there.
Well, they've already been working on that, right? They're making it more and more restrictive to get into Yosemite.
Yeah, I remember the days when you could climb Half Dome just by walking in and doing it. Now you got to have permits, and you have to wait in line for permits. Good luck getting one. Same way with Mount Whitney. So we the people supposedly own the national parks. Well, not so much if you actually want to use it.
Yeah, the national parks are becoming playgrounds of the elite. And with us, that is the end of our time. I want to thank you guys for being here. Thank you, John. Thank you, Richard. Thank you for watching. We will see you next week. And please remember to love everybody.
Thank you, James.